this video I'm gonna show you guys is someone actually tried to school my hybrid, thinking that trying to criticize how many hybrids I've got. Well, you've seen in the first video, someone actually made a whole bunch of video trying to say that my hybrid is simply too badly confused. Well, let's take a look at what they have to say about this video. And I'll be bringing up points that actually say otherwise. Although in agreement, I will say I did make a few too many things. But here was my method of what I was trying to make my Abaddon Dragon out. Alright, I bet you used my DNA to make this hybrid, which makes this hybrid is sort of like... Hey now, let's not bring family into this. Anyway, moving on to the school.
They try and ground it with some realism, and we're going to try and do exactly the same thing to debunk this Indominus Rex 3.0. But remember, 70% of this genome is made up of small animals, so the 30% of the T-Rex and the Saurophaganax are not going to off-put that. But it's going to go berserk, turn into some type of sociopath.
That's the same point that thy critics actually tried to say, that it's too confused and too contributing and won't exactly know what to use. Well, let's go ahead and have you take a seat.
Then the original Indominus Rex, it'd probably be around the size of a velociraptor. If the natural predator to a great ape is weakness to humans, they've used the Saurophaganax clearly for its teeth, the serrated jaws. So the genomes here, they're non-aggressive. Huge weakness to human pathogens. Indominus Rex 3.0. 3.0 is exactly the same as the 2.0.
Indominus 3.0.
Well, looks like this just keeps happening and people never learn. If there are any two words the internet has ruined when it comes to debates, it's, well, actually, but looks like it's our
that's
turn.
Exactly
because
how it
someone
feels.
wanted to weigh in on the hybrid that the internet has collectively decided to try and kill. Someone thought they were onto something and thought they could seriously school Goji Center about our own creation before throwing their own name into the ring. Our response? Take a seat. You might learn something for your own creations.
That's what I used.
Because today on Goji Center, class is once again in session. The report in scrutiny for today, a video published by YouTuber Shadows, who made a few...
And it's a similar thing to my critics. For the sake of this live stream, I'm just gonna call you Shadows as well. So, Shadows, take a seat.
Statements that cannot be forgiven. Shadow's video tackled the subject from an interesting angle. Granted, the Jurassic franchise has always had a fickle relationship with realism. On one hand, the animals involved are supposedly to be completely normal flesh and blood animals. On the other hand, some amount of fantasy for the sake of spectacle is always to be expected in fiction. Still though, there's always going to be limits when you're not talking about something with flat-out kaiju like the Godzilla franchise. When we began talking about and introducing our own hybrids back in 2023, it was common consensus amongst everyone watching that hybrid creation like this in the real modern-day world is flat-out impossible due to many real-life genetic hurdles that need to be bypassed. That is, being able to extract DNA from extinct species that died off millions of years ago. Beyond that, the next challenges would be selecting genetic contributors that will mostly positively create a build for a brand new animal with a specific purpose, which in the 2.0's case is to create a primarily terrestrial creature whose purpose is to act as a localized extinction event, driven to wipe out entire ecosystems, including all life forms, and reproduce quickly to attain said goal. That's it! We've been pretty clear about that from the start, and if you've been carefully following this hybrid fiasco, you'd probably know this quite well. Unlike Shadows, who probably skimmed through plenty of videos and posts that mentioned this repeatedly. And for...
and obviously his research team actually tried to dissuade, said I had too many, which I, after going through it, did make myself... Actually did acknowledge there are a lot of contributors, but there are complementary contributors.
For some odd reason, kept calling it 3.0? It was at this point when we knew this was going to be fun. Come on, dude, it's 2.0. Where did the 3 come from? This, maybe?
Good question.
Anyone who actually watched the video would know the 3.0 is completely completely unnecessary. Additionally, before revealing their creation like other infamous examples like Goji Guy's Hank and Dangerville's Primatus, Shadows thought it would be a good idea to nerf the 2.0 as much as they could by trying to smack it with the realism stick.
That's exactly what my critics tried to do. Yeah, you tried to say there are a lot of say it would be too confused. No, I didn't. There would be too many. There aren't that many contributing confusions. I mean, you know what? I'm just gonna let Goji Center explain his methods, which is what methods I've used in similar context.
So let's investigate some of the claims before we completely debunk these statements.
No, you could say destroy, cause I did the same thing.
And
That's
at the
okay.
end, we'll see who wields this metaphorical stick better.
Yep.
One of the bold claims that Shadows put forth is that the 2.0 would be far smaller than the Indominus Rex, producing some graphs claiming that the 2.0 was a runt, also mentioning that the large size of the Indominus Rex was due to Giganotosaurus and additional big-bodied species in the genome including Tyrannosaurus and Deinosuchus. With the Giga additive removed from the 2.0 and the Deinosuchus swapped out with the African dwarf crocodile for more armor, the claim was that the small species like short-tailed shrew would shrink the 2.0 down to being a fraction of the size of the original.
And let's also not forget the fact that they were talking about conflicting instincts. I do not recall there are too many conflicting instincts here. Yeah, there are a lot of conflicting instincts, but I've had complementary instincts.
Except they seem to have forgotten something. Them. Contrary to other claims, viewers who remember our size chart videos might recall that Tyrannosaurus Rex currently holds the spot as the largest predatory dinosaur. Giganotosaurus is certainly up there as well, and any hybrid using a lot of one or both of them is going to wind up huge. Shadows claims that because Shrew is in the genome, its contribution would be enough to shrink the 2.0 down to halfway point. And also keep in mind what they're using as a basis is Jurassic World's logic. So here's how this goes.
Don't always have the answers all the time. That is true. They really don't. I mean, they try to dissuade mine, saying how it's talked about in realism, which I still don't think is. I still think they were just salty, but I did so just because I wanted to challenge. I didn't want to argue too much. Plus, I wanted to see what I could do with fewer contributors.
Under this logic, assuming that the 2.0 should be the size of a velociraptor, the Indominus Rex, on the other hand, would technically also be reduced greatly. The use of cuttlefish, pit viper, frog would also shrink the Indominus. But did it? No.
See? Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of. Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for. Yeah, that's the same logic I was going for.
The argument against this is that the Indominus Rex does have a greater number of larger animals in its genome. T-Rex, Deinosuchus, Giga, Therizinosaurus. But what Shadows doesn't seem to get is that these things do not affect the size of a hybrid as you think it does. One of the reasons is that when building a hybrid, step number 1 is always choosing a base genome. This base genome is largely going to establish how large and what body type your hybrid will mostly resemble. What Shadows thinks we did, and everyone who participated in the hybrid war did, was that we all put animals in a blender and every creature contributed an equal amount to the animal's genome, which cannot be more wrong. The 2.0...
See? I said, yeah, and that's the same, those are the same points I pointed out. Yeah, the base genome was Megalania and the Hatzegopteryx, having the body of a pterosaur and other complementary instincts, allowing it to fly, having it the ability and instinct to fly. So, yeah, that's why I was choosing all those things. Everything else was just to further enhance the other traits. And generally speaking, all of them are vertebrates.
for example, uses the base genome of T-Rex. According to more recent studies, it is now well established that T-Rex could in fact reach the size of 42 feet in length, with very few exceptionally large individuals probably breaching these sizes. So the length of the 2.0, regardless of the absent Giga, is still very much supported, which is the same case of the Indominus Rex. Had Shadows actually paid attention in our video introducing the 2.0, he'd know very well that the 2.0 was actually shrunk in size in comparison to a full-grown Indominus Rex. A sweet spot to better hunt down animals of smaller size classes, but retaining enough mass to take down the big ones. The extra additions such as longer ape arms, full body armor, shorter hind limbs, and Shrew's iron-covered teeth were all possible thanks to advanced gene editing technology.
Which is the same method I have been using.
Seen in Jurassic World, but believe it or not, a form of this actually exists in real life. To further explain this, we won't use Jurassic Park's logic anymore. We'll go further. We'll use real-life examples.
Yep!
What you're looking at right now is a glow-in-the-dark cat. Thanks to real-life gene editing technology, geneticists were able to select a few genes from a jellyfish and add them to the cat's genome that builds the skin on the face of this cat. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realize the majority of this animal's genome is made up of house cats, not jellyfish. This kitty is not about to sprout stingers or need to live in water. Also, did the kitten shrink or increase in size? No. See?
See? Yeah, I mean, yes, I did admit I did count on the different contributors I did. I'm so sorry I did not go into specific details about the Abaddon Dragon. I was a little bit in a hurry, and my brain was not working at the time, but that was where my thinking process was. It was not, I was not using everything equally. That I was actually choosing base genomes, and everything else was just add-on.
Careful, meticulous gene splicing is a real thing. And the reason this cat is the same size of a regular house cat is the same reason why the Indominus Rex turned out to be 40+ feet in Jurassic World. And also why the 2.0, despite having small animals in its genome, is not the size of a raptor. So instead of splicing huge chunks for every genetic contributor in, the 2.0 was made by taking a real, biologically accurate Tyrannosaurus and swapping in different sized pieces of DNA depending on what was needed. This is how you make a hybrid.
See? There you go. That was where my method was. Yeah, I was actually taking notes here. Thanks, Goji Center.
Not throwing everything in a blender, which is what the folks at Shadows are failing to understand. Note how the smaller gene sources for the 2.0 were largely restricted to isolated body parts, like the arms, teeth, skin, and egg-producing organs. Keep this in mind as we continue to revise Shadows' wild claims.
I mentioned instincts before, and definitely confused and all that, but yeah. Moving on.
Shadows tried to make a big deal about claiming the great ape DNA would be some kind of hidden weakness. Namely, that great apes have weak immune systems, and that they become violent and sociopathic when left alone. So the resulting hybrid would be a chaotic mess of a brute. At this point, the web has been flooded with horror stories, and a certain scene from Nope, making it look like some of our nearest relatives turned into berserk psychopaths at the drop of a hat. Here's the reality check. Great apes, and especially chimpanzees, are not orcs. Chimpanzees can absolutely be violent. Just ask the various monkeys and game they dispatch. But has anyone else ever noticed the horror stories going around the web are always the same 3 cases over and over again? To give the Cliff Notes, 2023 reevaluation by anthropologist and war expert R. Brian Ferguson found that some of the Gombe chimpanzee wars casualties were probably the result of leopard attacks. The infamous face ripper Travis, for example, was a drugged animal kept in horrid conditions. And if anyone wants to bring up the attack at the animal sanctuary, we dare you to take a good look at the humans who targeted that couple after the fact and tell us the chimps were the only brutal ones here. Now, Compare that to the thousands of other chimpanzees that are raised in isolation that didn't act out. If bad living conditions automatically turned chimpanzees into chaotic brutes, we'd be seeing attacks all the time. What Shadows tried to do in saying the 2.0 would be a senseless brute was take a tiny substrata of evidence and label every single chimpanzee in both the wild and captivity as a senseless maniac. This dude owes chimpanzees a public apology.
Agreed. And the conflict, yeah, that's the same thing about, yeah, I'm actually glad they brought this, even though it was indirect, it still brings up the point about the instincts about being all confused and all that conflicting. There's a again, that does not mean again, it does not mean that it would be confused just because there are small percentages of different DNAs.
The truth is that yes, chimps can be violent, but they aren't really psychos. They definitely aren't more psychotic than a lion or a horse, animals that kill more humans annually than chimps. Now, if we wanted the 2.0 to be as berserk as possible, putting it in the same enclosure that the Indominus Rex lived in would get that job done. But nowhere in any of our previous videos did we mention that the 2.0 was kept in such conditions.
That's true.
There was an awful lot of supposing going on in a video
That's
claiming
the
to dissect
same
something.
thing that
One
I've
of the key
had to
points
go
was
through.
that the 2.0 would be another basket case of mishmash traits like the Scorpius Rex. Issues were brought up like the Tyrannosaur DNA screwing up the eyesight or whiptail lizard contribution leading it to drop its tail in the worst way possible, severely compromising it. In other words, a self-owning by the hybrid's own genome. Unfortunately for Shadows, this is not the case of the 2.0 electrocuting its own brain with zappy
said
fish
it was
DNA like some Hall of Shame entries. Let's go through these claims one by one.
Here, yeah, the reason I have chosen from the list of the Abaddon Dragon was not just selected out of random, and y'all are trying to say that I didn't do my research. Well, I actually did, and I knew exactly why I have chosen each individual species. We'll be going back to my video as soon as this video is done.
Because, boy, there are a lot of them.
Also added the whiptail lizard in. Again, that's presumably because the whiptail lizard can regenerate cells. I mean, the whiptail lizard drops its tail. Literally can.
The whiptail lizard, according to Shadows, was added for regeneration and claimed it would affect the tail in falling.
If he wanted to do that, he would have chosen axolotl DNA. Makes me think that Shadows overlooked the one fact they missed. Goji Center based there on actual science and information on real animals because they paid attention.
Off. This
Exactly.
Is something they made up out of thin air. Recall that the other genome additions were meticulously selected from each contributing animal. The only reason the whiptail lizard makes itself present in the 2.0's genome is for its sexual organs. The ability to reproduce asexually via apomictic parthenogenesis. This allows the 2.0 to reproduce exact copies of herself repeatedly without needing a mate. And that's it. Let's see what else Shadows made up.
Couple it with the T-Rex's poor eyesight.
With the T-Rex's poor eyesight,
Real
The
life,
eyesight.
dude!
Here's yet another reminder that the 2.0 was not made with any dinosaurs from the Jurassic Park franchise. This one was made from real-life animals. This makes Shadows' claim that the eyesight of the 2.0 would be messed with obsolete. And even if it was a JP T-Rex that we used, note how this didn't even affect the original Indominus Rex or Indoraptor.
Comparing the original and the 2.0/3.0, you'll notice a stark contrast. It's missing several dinosaurs. In fact, the 2.0 has only 9 species of genome, where the original actually has 13. They decided to take out the Therizinosaurus, the Deinosuchus, the Giga, the Carno, the Ragop.
Next, the claim that the lesser number of genetic contributors in the 2.0 was a handicap couldn't be further from the truth. Let us introduce Shadows with a new word: congruity. Put very simply, the less contributors that share more characteristics, the better. In 2.0,
And after looking through that was kind of my handicap. I was trying to add a few contributors that actually complement each other. That's where the matter of fact, let me pull up my video right here. The base genomes. Yeah, I should have been a little bit more specific. I should have just written contributors or genomes. The base genome I've chosen is the Hatzegopteryx, which is where the body plan would be, but I've chosen Megalania for the head and biting, serrated bite and venom, as well as the tail, so you could say there's 2 contributors. And I actually have about 8 contributors out of the 16 that I have chosen right here. So let's count. Let's go ahead and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 contributors that actually contribute to the flying abilities out of 16. So it does have the ability. So yeah, so it's got the hovering ability of the Osprey and the impact absorption of the Gannet, allowing it to give impact, allowing it to strike with high speed, and as well as the Talons, thanks to the Haas Eagle and Argentavis, as well as the Osprey. And furthermore, the Vampire Bat would have allowed it to have beat vision, as well, and of course the Sea Crate would allow it to have the ability to use more potent venom, and the crocodile DNA I've specifically chosen only for the immune system. So, and of course the platypus DNA as well. I've only chosen that because of to further enhance those talons. That's it. So, with that being said, there's no so if we was to put that in a graph, it would be the Megalania and Hatzegopteryx combined, it would be most likely 70%, like 63% Hatzegopteryx, it would be well over 30% Hatzegopteryx. Yeah, it would mostly be made of Hatzegopteryx DNA. Actually, about just under half, give or take, of Hatzegopteryx. Everything else would be making that up. I would say about 45% Hatzegopteryx. Everything else would be filling their roles specifically. This would be about the second place. And the only reason I've chosen Utahraptor is to allow it to use its wings use its claws for a better attack, as well as the sawing ability. That's just about it. That's pretty much all I've ever chosen. May need a real shake. Are not on the edge. That is true. That's pretty much ironic. It's the same logic here. This is actually why I wanted to show this video to further explain what I had in mind right here. Yeah, the only reason I've chosen Raven and Crow is because that brain-solving ability, but it would also have the ability to scavenge and be more capable of resisting those poisons, and further enhances the flying instinct. And of course, there's also the Vampire Bat combined with the Arapaima. The only reason I've chosen the Arapaima was because of those scales, being both flexible and very durable. Yeah, and the Vampire Bat I've chosen for the flying instinct, the ability to jump, have a standing jumping takeoff, and also allowing it to distribute the blood, and make the scales deposits for that iron. That's it. So yeah, even though there's a lot here, about 16, yeah, that's 16 contributors, there's still a lot of complementary contributors. So, yeah, nice try, all you critics out there.
8 out of 9 of the contributors are vertebrates. 7 out of 9 have 4 limbs. 9 out of 9 dispatch prey with their hinged jaws. 5 out of 9 of them use their forelimbs for attack or locomotion. And the similarities go on and on. And every one of these animals contributed only what is required to make the 2.0 functional, with a larger percentage of them with agreeable instincts. For instance,
see? Agreeable instincts. The ability to fly. Use its bite for an attack. And using those, and so many of them using claws.
dwarf crocodiles are known to be very reclusive around humans, simply because we aren't on the menu and weight class. Shadows claimed that these are very passive, but try telling that to the reptiles, small mammals, and crustaceans it eats all the time.
Uh-huh. See? And I've chosen the shrew for not only the ability for the iron teeth, but also the high metabolism. So the claws also can be a deposit for iron.
Give this animal a larger body and this thing would be a Caprasuchus reincarnated, hunting us instead. This animal hunts on land more often, similar to the 2.0, does not use the death roll like other species, and of course comes with the perk of full body armor, which is why this animal was picked over another larger croc with more conflicting instincts. Next up is the utter disrespect on the short-tail shrew. This animal, if you remember correctly, and paid attention, was used primarily for its iron-ingrained teeth, venomous saliva, and thrashing jaw motion when attacking, which works in tandem with the T-Rex's bite and very strong, deep-rooted teeth.
Same reason I've chosen the Mangalania. Iron teeth, venomous bite, but for the shrew, higher metabolism.
They've used the Saurophaganax clearly for its teeth, the serrated jaws.
No, this doesn't have Saurophaganax serrated teeth as Shadow so boldly claimed. We never said it did. The addition of the shrew did come with some attributes that initially may seem as drawbacks, but given the intended purpose of this animal, which is to kill everything, this is actually a good thing.
Let's hope you have a Goji Center design hybrid for you as a gift for supporting their channel. Well, he would have to watch my videos if I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I actually submitted it to the right place, but maybe next time, assuming the hybrid war continues.
Higher metabolism requires this creature to hunt more often and store its prey once it goes catatonic to eat for later.
So them great ape arms we can see on there wouldn't be all that big. They wouldn't even have them claws. Sure, they'd be quite muscular, but they wouldn't have them claws on the end of it. But we can say that comes from the Velociraptor.
Shadows completely misunderstood the composition of the 2.0's arms, claiming that the arms would be small on a small hybrid, which we debunked this already, and that this thing won't have claws, which we clearly stated in the original video featuring the 2.0 that these came from
that's where the Saurophaganax claws came into play.
Classified as Allosaurus anax indefinitely, not from a Velociraptor. The use of Great Ape for the 2.0 was for the following: providing fast twitch muscles for the enlarged arms, extra digits including a thumb for manipulating objects and using tools, and for an enhanced level of problem solving and intelligence, fully bolstered by T-Rex collaborative nature and heightened senses.
And it will die.
One of the wildly preposterous claims that sent ripples across Goji Center HQ was this one. One of the advantages of this hybrid and having a large dinosaur biology is resilience to smaller, lesser mammalian viruses. The statement that apes are highly vulnerable to a sneeze, for instance, would hold up had this creature been made up of mostly mammals with a predominant mammalian anatomy. This, however, isn't the case. The flesh and bone that makes up most of this hybrid is similar to that of a T-Rex, and the 2.0 influence of ape in the brain and arms isn't enough for it to be a detrimental kryptonite factor on its saurian immune system. Besides, apes are already more resilient than people might think, with faster acting immune response.
I mean, it's natural. I mean, if you live out in the wild, of course you're gonna expect more pathogens. You're gonna be expecting more viruses, poisons. I mean, One scratch is a very high risk of infection.
Responses than most mammals. Additionally, the hybrid wouldn't have the compressed sinuses and snout that leads to infections apes like us might get. And any issues that do exist can be patched up by the dwarf croc and dinosaurian biology that is heavily resilient to mammalian viruses. The 2.0 was made to be a great carrier of various viruses, able to survive holding those infections for a long time thanks to not being as badly affected as other animals. It might inevitably die after a long time once a strain mutates in such a way that it will prove lethal, but not before acting as a horrible bridge to so many pathogens for anything that came across it. We could keep going, but we covered just about all the big crazy claims mentioned in Shadow's deplorable demonstration of his understanding of the 2.0 and really hybrids in general. That hybrid they're making with human DNA? Well, all of you know where we're sending that hybrid.
All right. And that is pretty much the same kind of problem I had to deal with. Yeah, that's... Let me go ahead and find this guy's hybrid real quick. Let's go ahead and do this. Where did he... Yeah, his response. Yeah, where did it... All right, yeah, let's go ahead and... Yeah, this is my official response to you, sir.
Hello, everyone. It's me, Alpha G. I know it's been some time since I haven't been uploading because I'm sorry. Utah.
Let's see. Yeah, he's got the thing right. Let's see. Megalania, Hetzograpteryx. Which again, I've chosen specifically in percentages, not equal blending. If you actually watched Goji Sinner's explanation, that is the method I was using. So, if anything, the Hetzogopteryx would be a much higher percentage. It would actually be the base body, not to mention the Megalania would only be second, Utahraptor being third, and just about everything else would be much higher for their specific traits that I have chosen.
Raptor has eagle, vulture, cobra. Looking at this hybrid, I'm sorry, young guy, but I have to state some of the facts about this hybrid of yours. Your hybrid is gonna break down, and you're probably wondering why. Well, it's because this hybrid in general is not going to be able to survive, and Mason doesn't need an upgrade to fight this hybrid.
Break down how? You didn't say... What do you mean by break down? First of all, it is designed to be a flying machine. It is more 50% flying ability. Almost all of the contributors are vertebrates. And again, the percentages I have chosen is actually much higher. But continue on.
Strong enough to take on this hybrid of yours. Let me state out the weaknesses of this hybrid of yours. Your hybrid is too heavy to fly, because
the heaviest flying predator, the flyer, is actually Hetzogopteryx, which is well over 600 pounds, while my hybrid is only about, hang on, where is it? Weighs about 300 pounds. So, that's actually a lot lighter than the heaviest flying reptile, despite having a much bigger wingspan and having the proportions I have chosen. So, no, it is not too heavy to fly. it actually has a wingspan of well over 35 feet long, in a body that is proportionally smaller, so it's mostly wing, if not tail and head. But proceed.
Because having these type of genetics of putting that on a hybrid would not only confuse it, but it wouldn't even know what it is. This is the same problem.
That's every hybrid that you can. If you actually watched Goji Center's video about his methods, one would argue that the various contributors, like the cave, if you looked at the original Indominus, you would see that the tree frog, the pit viper, and the cuttlefish would, if by your logic, would actually mean that they would be confused. So confused, but that did not happen because that is not how DNA works.
That the Indominus Rex had from the Jurassic World movie. Not only that, but some of the parts of the bones, the hollow parts of the bones in Pacifica, will have some weight limits to it. And adding dense reptiles would
It would mostly be hollow bones, like pterosaurs and the birds of prey that I have chosen. And the gannet would actually allow it to be a much better swimmer. That's why I have chosen the gannet. It would be better at taking impacts.
bulk it really too much. So this hybrid would not be able to fly. And I'm sorry, but I have to be real about this.
No, you're not. That's just an opinion. You have forgotten the laws of biomechanics. That's what I have been taking into account. And the confusion thing, that's not how DNA works. I did not choose things at equilibrium.
Not only that I had to go over all of this, but I had to make sure that you did your research right, because if you didn't, you need to improve on that.
And after looking through that, I do admit I made too many contributors, which is why I've made a challenge for myself to make them that much fewer contributors. So yeah, 16 is a lot, but I've reduced it to a much fewer number. You can check the link in the description for what I have chosen.
Make like an upgrade version, or something that it can make it fly more, that way it doesn't have to be so heavy with all this genetics that you put it in.
You forget that you have to understand how the weight actually works. The dragon I created, actually uses more Hatzegopteryx DNA.
There is some good news, and there are some bad news, which is probably the walking portion and the balance issue with the hybrid genetics, especially having that long neck of his and the balancing upright, which will cause this hybrid with some issues.
Quadrupedal stance and the long tail, that actually would make it much better at keeping itself on the ground. Second, having long necks on the Hatzegopteryx, the proportions of that still give it a much better strike. Plus, it having a long neck actually balances out the tail.
But don't worry, this hybrid is still able to swim and all that stuff, but its wings will be a very liability. So I'm
Wrong. Flight. It's mostly wing. And it's actually got a proportionally small torso. And the balancing from the tail and neck actually allow it to stay aerodynamic.
I'm sorry that I have to say this, but your hybrid has too many issues, and especially having these genetics of its intelligence and adding cobra aggression and crocodile.
Again, that is not how DNA works. You're trying to say that if I have too many contributors, that there are too many conflicting instincts, that is not how DNA works. Again, bringing up the Indominus example, if that were the case, that would mean that the Indominus would instinctively try to hop like a tree frog or slither like a snake. But does it do that? No, because there are way more contributors that are based on the theropod genome. My hybrid is mostly that of the flying genome. So, matter of fact, let me go ahead and pull up that video again. Let's see here. Let's see. Out of all the contributing vectors that I have chosen, let me count again with a flying. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, wait. No, that's all actual. I said 8. Oh, God. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 9 out of 16 that are capable of flight. And that's out of 16. So, there are way more instincts that are allowing it to fly. I have chosen the crocodile specifically, crocodile and sea crate, making it allow to use its tail more to be able to swim. The gannet and osprey actually allow it to flap its wings whilst in the water. My hybrid is actually more designed to be a flying, killing machine. So it's going to be more likely to rule the skies. So, a lot of opinions, but there's no schooling this.
Dial patients and whatnot. This would also not only confuse the animal, but it would, how do I say this? Overstimulate / paranoid this animal.
That is not how DNA works. Just because you place DNA in something does not mean that it would have the instincts. Like how Goji Center talked about the real-life genetics, there are actually various species of creatures that glow in the dark. But the glowing gene is actually from jellyfish. But specifically what the Goji Center used specifically is the glow-in-the-dark cat. But the thing is, with those cats, they actually, the only thing that actually indicates that they actually have jellyfish DNA is the fact that they have the ability to glow in the dark. But does that mean they have are sprouting tentacles or stingers on their fur? No, because that's not how DNA works. And does that also mean that they are entirely reliant on water? No, because these cats are not 50% jellyfish. It is just a small portion of that DNA. If anything, those cats would be more like 99.9% cat. Another example would be goats that actually have actually been genetically modified to allow it to produce spider silk. But does that mean those goats actually have 8 legs and walk on the walls? No, because that is not how DNA works. If anything, those species would be more like 99.9% goat. In the case of my hybrid, however, it is quite a mishmash, but the base genome would be the Hatzegopteryx, making it a much bigger flyer and also a much more durable creature whilst on the ground. And that obviously there are a lot of contributors. However, the equal pie method that you seem to be thinking about is not how hybrids are made. If you watch Goji Center's video right here, link in the description, you would understand the method that I have used.
Because of its other genetics that you combined it with, which would not only confuse this animal, but also make it very paranoid to its surroundings and whatnot. Especially when it comes to having this type of genetics that you put it in, especially for the strengths and weaknesses. The strengths are, well, aquatic ambushes,
It would actually be flight, and it would actually not be as good of a swimmer as I previously thought. But the reason I have chosen the crocodile DNA specifically is only for the immune system. And the megalania, being a monitor lizard itself, would actually further enhance that, and also having lightweight armor.
Venom Verity is good, and intimidation with the wings and all that stuff, and
At least you acknowledge that. It is a very terrifying display. But, don't forget, it still has powered flight.
smart and burst, but the weaknesses are the overload body, unstable behavior, low endurance.
No, it will not be overloaded based on different behaviors. It would be simply to, there are a lot of congruent different instincts that it would have, because over half of the genome that I have chosen all have flying capabilities.
On land, and it won't be able to fly. Even if it tried to fly, it will end up killing itself.
Lies! Again, over 50% of the genome that I have chosen are all flying creatures. And if anything, those other forms of all those other genomes that I have chosen would actually have a much smaller percentage. So it would not only, I did not choose it based off of equal 50-50, the proportions and the percentages of those genetic genomes would be much more in favor of the flying contributors.
And I'm being very real about this because I have to state
No, you're not.
a lot of facts about this hybrid of yours.
Opinions. Not facts. Opinions.
So, this is why I have to state the facts about a hybrid, because if you're going to make a very strong and very durable hybrid, you need to do your research right, because if you don't do your research right with your hybrids and all that stuff, your hybrid will not always be able to do this or that.
I think Goji Center would actually have a lot of words with you, sir. You and your friend that actually would love to criticize me for. But I digress.
I even had to make sure about the flaws on Mason, not just on the original Mason, but also Mason 2.0.
You forget, the spray is actually a very devastating weapon. If I remember correctly, that the face would be where the spinning cobra would be shooting. So there is that instinct. And you have a keen sense of smell and good eyesight. That is a very huge weak spot for my dragon.
Because I already know that Mason is not capable of killing the Indominus 2.0, because I know I wasn't even mentioned, not on Gochi Sensor's video, but I also even had to realize the mistakes that I had for this hybrid of mine. So, this is why I'm keeping this video short, because this is just a message to you, letting you know that this hybrid of yours would not be able to defeat Mason, because since I'm using realism, not
for your hybrid perhaps, but you forget. I'm sure you were using percentages on your hybrid as well. But again, My hybrid is also using various percentages, not of equal share, but a higher percentage in favor of flying creatures.
Not just realism, but also my own stuff that I had to put on this hybrid of mine, and especially from anything else, from what I know, this hybrid of yours would not be able to survive. So,
That's a lie. Strong immune system, durable armor, but lightweight armor, capable of flight, spray attack, and adaptable maneuverability. Nice try, Mason, but that is not how DNA works. Trying to say there are a lot of weaknesses. I admit, one swipe from your claws or one bite would kill my dragon. But none of those weapons of yours would actually matter if they don't hit anything.
sorry.
Also, someone actually also brought up that there is actually that tail that is potentially swinging. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work very well because that's a lot of weight you're gonna have to swing over, and it being flying all over the place. My hybrid would already be flying out of the way before the tail can actually swing, and it would have already sprayed. Also, there is also the eyelid issue that someone might actually bring up. The problem with that, of course, is the spinning cobra, like all snakes, actually have scales that cover their eyes. So, there's an advantage there, a counter advantage against its own blinding spray. So, and it also would not be shedding very much, and it would actually stay in the water a lot of the time because it does not blink. And the shielding scales would actually allow it to stay in the air, spray its attack, and not have to worry about its about hurting itself.
So this is just a little message to you to improve on your work and try to make your hybrid a little more better if you try to make it.
That's a vague statement. I actually made fewer contributors if you actually like to see videos of that. But I digress. I made 2 hybrids of similar nature. So thanks for that.
2.0 or 3.0. So don't go too hard on your hybrid next time. And that's all I gotta say. I'll see you guys later.
Weak argument.